Hey everybody, I'm Stevie Stroh, and in this video we are going to try to show you the basics of setting up MAME to emulate the color computer family of computers. MAME is one of a handful of color computer emulators that we have at our disposal, and it's the one that probably has the greatest barrier to entry. Many people favor VCC for its user-friendly interface and almost instant ability to hit the ground running emulating a Coco. XRoar is also a great emulator for emulating the Color Computer 1 and 2 and Dragon. However, it currently does not support the Color Computer 3. And then there's MAME that can emulate just about anything, and it does a really good job, especially on Coco 3 side of emulation. However, getting it working and working the way you want it to does require a little bit of work, shall we say. And so hopefully in this video, we're going to cover all the basics of doing all of that and getting you up and running and emulating color computers and the family of color computers using MAME. So why don't we start off by asking the question of what is MAME? And MAME stands for the Multi-Arcade Machine Emulator. And you can get it from the official website, which is mamedev.org. And some people might remember another project or product by the name of MES. MES was a system known as the Multi-Emulator Super System. At one point in time, MAME and MES were two separate projects and two separate products. The initial focus of MAME was on emulating arcade hardware-based systems. The initial focus on MES was to emulate home video game systems and personal computers. And at some point in time, MAME and MES became one and the same. So at this point in time, when we say MAME, the MES is silent. It is all inclusive. At this point, MAME and the MAME MES combined will emulate just about any system on the planet. What else do you need to know about MAME? Well, it is legitimately and legally free because it is an open source project. It is constantly being updated, and because of that, it will often get broken. So as people are working on it and updating things and adding features, sometimes things get broke. However, you can report bugs to the MAME devs, and they are very good at getting those fixed in future releases. Another thing to realize about MAME, like other emulators, the ROMs are not part of the system. MAME is a framework to emulate a system of your choice. In order to do that, you must obtain the ROM images of the system you want to emulate. And we'll cover where to go and how to do that. Now, because there's a lot to do to get things going, I'm going to break this introduction into MAME into two parts, into two videos actually. So this is going to be video part 1. And part 1 is going to cover where to go and how to download and install MAME. Where to go and how to download and install the ROM images. I'm going to give you a preliminary look at kind of fine-tuning and tweaking some of the general MAME interface settings to make it a little bit more pliable in our hands. And then very quickly we'll end this first video on just showing you what it looks like to boot up a color computer and see that glorious green screen and that fabulous OK prompt. In the second video, in part 2, we're going to do a slightly deeper dive, and we're going to get into some of the tweaking aspects of MAME and how it relates to the color computer. So I'm going to introduce you to the keyboard emulation concepts and how to toggle emulation modes and how to bring up the user interface for MAME specific to your color computer. At that point in time, we'll go over how we can map custom Coco keys to specific keys on your keyboard so you can really tweak where you want your keys to go and what keys you want to do for various things. Also show you how to take a joystick that's connected to your real computer and configure that and map that over to run through MAME on your color computer. And then last but not least, as a proof of concept, we're going to show you how you can boot up into a color computer cartridge and load a disk into an emulated color computer on MAME. And that will conclude the introduction on how to get MAME up, how to make MAME become a Coco, how to configure the Cocoa to your liking, to your keyboards, and to your taste, and then a real quick introduction to loading software and running software on MAME. So hopefully you will enjoy that. Hopefully this will help some people. On that note, let's get started. Where do we go to get MAME? We go to the website that is called mamedev.org, and this is what its home screen looks like. When you scroll down a little bit, you'll notice that there are links to download MAME for your operating system of choice. So there you can download it for Windows, you can download it for Mac, you can download it for Linux. As far as I know, Windows is the only one that constantly provides you with an already compiled and ready to run binary file that you can just double click and execute. I'm pretty sure in Linux you have to make the program using various tools, and then I believe even on the Mac there are pre-made binaries for download, but they're not always the latest one. So if you want to have the latest version of MAME on the Mac OS, you're either going to have to learn how to make it from the command prompt. I might be using the wrong word. I know it's not compile, but building it, making it happen, turning it into the actual thing you can run, you're going to have to do that. But there are a handful of people in the community that do from time to time take it upon themselves to maintain a particular version of MAME for the Mac OS that they've verified to be kind of stable and works, and then they have those binaries that they will help distribute. So I know Barry Nelson does that, and I think Tim Lindner has some of those as well. The current version as of the recording of this video, which is from May in the year 2020, is MAME version 0.220. You know that they will continuously update this over time. And so depending on your operating system, you're going to go ahead and download. Since I'm running Windows, the versions of Windows right now, I've got it's basically MAME, a 64-bit exe. Now in the past, they've actually provided 32-bit binaries. However, I'm not seeing a 32-bit. So at this time, I only see MAME for 64-bit Windows. And in my case, that's not even a concern because that's what I have. When you download that file, you will get a file on your desktop here that is basically a self-contained zipped up archive. So it's a file that says MAME 0220 blah blah blah, and when you double click that, it's going to ask you where do you want to extract it. Now I created a folder on my desktop called MAME, so I'm going to say I'm going to go into my /users/Steve/desktop, and then I'm going to go ahead and type in MAME to stick it in that folder so it doesn't rain files all over my desktop. So I'm going to stick everything in this MAME folder that I will bring up for you here in just a second as soon as it is done extracting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, here we go. So now what we see in this folder here is what got extracted from that MAME archive file. And the main program that you want to run is this big blue M icon here that says mame64.exe. That's the binary that's going to run MAME. But I want to point something else out to you. I want to point out to you that there's a ROMs folder here. And in this ROMs folder, this is where you would stick the ROM files for the systems you want to emulate and the systems you want to run. So if you wanted MAME right now to play arcade games, you would have to get the arcade ROMs for your various games and stick them in here, and then you would be able to play those arcade machines. In the case of the Color Computer and its family of other machines like the Dragon and the Brazilian clones, etc., you want to get those ROMs and stick them in this ROMs folder here. Where are we going to get those ROMs from? We are going to head over to the Color Computer Archive, which is colorcomputerarchive.com. From this archive menu folder thingy here, there is in the bottom right hand corner a section for ROMs. We're going to click on ROMs. And there's lots of choices here, but we're actually going to choose the category here that says MESS. And this dates back to where MESS was a separate system, and MESS was what was used to emulate the Cocoa. It's now all kind of folded into MAME. And there are a number of ROMs here, and what I would ask you to do is just to go ahead and download all of them and save them into that ROMs folder, starting with the first ROM that's called Cocoa. So what I've done is I don't have my Google Chrome automatically saved to my downloads folder. I have it ask me where to save. So I've browsed over to my desktop. I'm going to browse into my MAME folder, and then I'm going to browse into my ROMs folder. So as I download each one of these ROMs and hit save, they're going to stick them directly where they need to be. Just know that no matter how you download this, they ultimately need to end up in the ROMs folder inside your main MAME directory. So I'm going to sit here and go through and download all of these ROMs. Okay, well, that time just went by like really fast, right? So I just downloaded 2 trillion ROMs, and just to verify where they may have gone, they are now in the ROMs folder of my MAME folder. And currently, unless I missed one, I have a total of 26 items, including one file in here that's called dir.txt. And I was getting cross-eyed looking at all these downloads, so I may have missed one, but I've got more than enough ROMs that I need right now in order to be able to just show you kind of what Willis is talking about here. So we've got MAME, which is our main executable. We've got ROMs. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and fire up the MAME user interface and play around with that as we get closer to launching our Cocoa. When I double click the big blue M icon to launch MAME, this is the first thing I'm going to see. This is the home screen, or the initial user interface of the MAME program. So in our initial screen here, you're going to see that there are a lot of different systems that MAME can potentially emulate, although we don't necessarily have the ROMs for those downloaded and installed. But what I want to show you here is that you can actually search for systems. So if I type in color computer, I can see that there are a number of color computers in here that MAME already recognizes and will know how to emulate. And what I also want to show you how to do real quick is how to add some of these to your favorites, so they're going to be quicker to find. And you have a little star key here, kind of like you have on your browsers to bookmark or favorite things. So I'm going to favorite the original color computer. I'll favorite the color computer 2. Just so you know, the color computer 2B is the one that has the lowercase capable chip. They call that the T1 chip. It's an updated version of the video display generator that is theoretically, or is actually technically capable of doing lowercase. So I don't need that. So I'll do color computer 2. I will go ahead and pull up a standard color computer 3 for NTSC, and then I'll even do a color computer 3 NTSC with the Hitachi 6309 in it. So if I favorite all of those, and then I go over here on the left hand side to where it says favorites, I now have kind of a short list of systems I can choose from. So rather than scrolling through 10 trillion different things MAME can emulate, I can just focus here now on my color computer ones. Because I have downloaded and installed the ROMs in my ROMs folder, I can launch this machine right now and it will run. But before I do that, I wanted to show you a few more things I want to do here to do some of the global settings to some of the MAME user interface options and keyboard options. Right now, when MAME first boots up, it is booted up in a full screen window. And this is the newest version, which I have not used in the past. I'm still using an older version, and I technically don't even use this thing. I launch everything from a batch file. But I don't want this. I don't want this interface to be full screen. I want to tweak that, and I want to tweak a few other things. So before we launch our Cocoa, we're going to go into configure options, and all the options I'm configuring now primarily apply to the MAME interface of the actual MAME system itself. And then when we get into the Cocoa on part 2, I'm going to show you how to tweak some of the user interface options that are specific to our needs for the color computer. So let's go into configure options. And then the first thing I want to do is I want to go into video options. And then I want to go ahead and turn my window mode on, because I don't want MAME to be maximized and in full screen. And then I'm going to go back 1 and return to previous menu. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look under miscellaneous options. And there's an option in here that's going to say skip info screen at startup. I want to turn that on, because typically when you first boot up a machine in MAME, there's a big thing that pops up that tells you what the computer is, what type of chips are inside it, what year it came out, all that good stuff. However, you would have to look at that every single time you booted up the machine. So we will do that. Return to previous menu. At this point here, we can save that configuration. Let's, now that I've done this part here and I've made the change, and I've changed it to not be full screen, the thing you'll notice now is that the MAME program is in a window. I can move it around, and I even have the little X here I can use to close MAME, so it looks more like a program I'm familiar with dealing with. So a few more things I want to tweak before we get into our Cocoa. Let's go to configuration options. Let's go to general inputs, and then we're going to go into user interface. And there's a few things that I want to remap, and these things are global settings that affect everything MAME does, and thereby extension are going to affect some of the things that your color computer will do. So the first thing I want to do is I want to either remap or disengage the pause screen. Of course, I can't find it now because my thing is scrolling all over the place. So here's the pause screen. And right now the pause is set to take the P key, and it will also allow you to not be shifted. So as long as you're not holding down shift and you're pressing down the P key, it will pause. And this is great if you're playing an arcade game and you want to pause the arcade game, but what if you're using your Cocoa and you're typing up some basic programs on the Cocoa and you press the letter P? It's going to pause. And so we don't want P to be paused. Now, if you want to remap something, the first thing to do, the recommended thing to do, is to first clear the mapping. So once you've highlighted this, if you press the delete key on your keyboard, I've now unmapped pause. Now, some keyboards actually have a pause key on there. So if you wanted to remap this and you hit enter, you would then press the next key that you wanted it to be. Now, of course, the keyboard that I'm on doesn't even have a pause key on it, so I'm not sure what I want to map it to. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit escape, and then I'm just going to hit delete, and I'm going to clear it. And so for my circumstances, I'm actually not going to have a pause key in the emulator for me, and I'm not worried about pausing my Cocoa as it's being emulated. However, you may want to map this to the key of your choice. So just remember, press the delete key to clear the previous mapping, press enter to get it into a kind of a listen mode. It's listening for whatever you're going to press, and then whatever you press will be that key. If you mess up, clear it out, remap it again. So in my case, I am getting rid of pause altogether. The next thing that I want to change is the user interface cancel key. So it's going to say UI cancel. Right now, UI select is enter. So when you're moving up and down your user interface, enter is the select key. The default key for cancel is escape. And I don't want my cancel key to be escape, because sometimes, although I think MAME has changed things just recently, but in the past, pressing escape also closed the emulation of the Cocoa. And so if you were in the middle of typing up a program and you had not saved that program to a disk image, and you hit escape one time too many and you closed the Cocoa, you lost everything. So just to be safe, I don't want my MAME user interface cancel key to be escape. So I'm going to hit delete to clear it out. And then at this point now, I'm going to hit enter to map it, and I'm going to make mine end. So I'm going to take a note here on what I did too, because I'll forget. And so I'm going to make my user interface cancel key end. And then last but not least, there is a UI toggle that we need to remap, or I'm going to suggest you remap, and this will make more sense when we get into part 2. But in order to bring up the user interface in your Cocoa to make changes like what keyboard keys work for what and what joysticks do things, or even just to load a file, to load a disk, or to load a cartridge, to bring up that menu, you need to press the tab key to bring up the menu. However, you can't press the tab key until you have pressed this toggle key to enable that. And by default, that toggle key wants to be the scroll lock key, which My keyboard doesn't have, most laptop keyboards don't have. Depending on your keyboard, you may not have the scroll lock key. If you have the scroll lock key, this is a non-issue, but I'm going to wager that there's probably 30 to 40% of people right now on newer keyboards that don't have scroll lock. So I'm going to clear that out. And in my case, what I'll do for grins and giggles is I'm going to map it to caps lock. So I'm going to press enter for it to be listening for what key I want to map it to. I'm going to press caps lock. So now, which happens to be right underneath my tab key. So now I can just hit caps lock and then tab to bring up my menu. Now that I've done all that and I get back, the last thing I want to do here is I want to go ahead and save this configuration, and then I can hit my end key to get out. Now I'm out of those tweakings. That was a one-time setup that I did to make some MAME things less destructive and a little bit more conducive to my particular keyboard. So the last thing I want to do on this video right now, and before we move on to more exciting stuff, is just to show you what it looks like to boot up a color computer. So at this point now, I'm just going to double click Color Computer 2. And when you do that through this user interface, another nice newer feature to MAME is that it recognizes a lot of the various different cartridges that have existed for the color computer. And if you were to download those cartridge images and put them in a particular folder, of which I'm not even sure what that's called right now, it would let you launch the Coco with that cartridge from this one here. So for example, you could have a blast with the new Math Tutor by going straight to that one. Since I don't want to launch a cartridge, I just want to launch a Coco. It's already highlighted on Start Empty. I'm just going to hit enter. And at this point, it has booted up my Coco. And again, because I changed one of the settings to not have MAME do everything full screen and to do it in a window, it makes it very easy for me to move things around. But one of the things I think would happen right now is if I press the escape key, okay, luckily it's not doing it now. This must be an update. But in the past, when I pressed the escape key, it would close the emulation. So I'm very fortunate that it's not doing that. But at this point, this is going to conclude part 1 of the video, which was just taking you through getting MAME downloaded, extracted, and put into somewhere on your computer where you could launch it. I've covered where to go to get some of the primary ROMs to emulate the primary models of your color computer 1, 2, and 3. And there was a bunch of ROMs for other things in there like RS-232 packs and Orchestra 90 and the speech and sound cartridge. And so there's a lot of other things in there too that you could all download and stick in here, and we'll make more use of those in future videos. But this concludes part 1, how to get MAME set up to emulate a Coco. Look at your Coco. It is here. So congratulations, you have now got MAME to Coco. We'll see you in part 2 in just a little bit.